Malik and Marcus Johnson were identical twin brothers who lived with their family in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Virginia. The neighborhood was peaceful and mostly inhabited by families who had lived there for many years. It was the kind of place where children played outside until dusk, and neighbors knew each other's names. But despite the calm surroundings, Malik and Marcus often felt different from most of their classmates. They were African American boys in a town where most people were white, and sometimes they felt like they didn't fully belong. But that never stopped them from working hard and dreaming big. Both Malik and Marcus were excellent students. They were known at their high school for their good grades and friendly nature. They enjoyed basketball, loved reading, and were involved in many school activities. Teachers admired their dedication, and their classmates looked up to them as leaders. The twins had always dreamed of going to top universities like Harvard or Yale. Their parents supported their dreams, encouraging them to focus on their studies and stay out of trouble. One sunny afternoon after finishing basketball practice, Malik and Marcus were walking home together. They were talking about an upcoming school project and laughing about something funny their coach had said during practice. They had no idea that this normal day was about to change their lives forever. As they approached a small shopping plaza near their neighborhood, they noticed flashing police lights. Several police officers were standing outside an electronics store. The store's windows were broken, and the front door was smashed. It looked like someone had vandalized the place. Malik and Marcus were curious but cautious, so they slowed down and tried to see what was happening. Suddenly, one of the officers spotted them. He called out, "Hey, you two, stop right there!" The twins stopped immediately, confused and a little scared. The officer came closer and asked them for their names and where they had been earlier that day. Malik and Marcus answered politely, but the officer didn't seem satisfied. Within minutes, more officers arrived, and the twins found themselves surrounded. They were told they were being detained because witnesses had described two young black men who looked just like them as the suspects who vandalized the electronics store and stolen several items. Malik and Marcus tried to explain that they had nothing to do with the crime and had been at basketball practice all afternoon, but no one seemed to listen. Their hands were handcuffed tightly behind their backs. They were shocked and scared. This was the first time anything like this had happened to them. They never imagined they would be treated this way in their own town. People who had seen them walking by stopped and stared, whispering among themselves. Some even pointed fingers. The twins felt a wave of shame and confusion wash over them. The police took them to the local station. While sitting in the cold, harsh holding cell, Malik and Marcus tried to understand why they were being accused. They felt helpless. Their phones were taken away, so they couldn't call anyone. They knew their parents would be worried sick once they found out. When their mother, Tanya Johnson, arrived at the police station, she was in shock. She knew her boys were innocent, but the officers acted as if they were criminals. Tanya tried to stay calm, but her voice trembled as she asked the officers to check the evidence carefully. "My sons are good boys. They couldn't have done this," she insisted. But the police seemed more interested in proving guilt than finding the truth. The local justice system quickly moved to press charges against Malik and Marcus. They were accused not only of vandalism but also of theft, based on the police reports and witness statements that were unclear and contradictory. The judge assigned to the case was Ronald Kessler, a man known in the community for being strict and harsh, especially with young black boys. Despite the twins' protests and their mother's pleas, the court set a high bail amount that Tanya knew she couldn't afford. The bail was so high that Malik and Marcus were forced to stay in juvenile detention while awaiting trial. The detention center was a scary place, cold, noisy, and full of boys who had made mistakes. But Malik and Marcus were different. They had done nothing wrong, yet they were treated as if they were guilty. At school, the news spread quickly. Some students believed the accusations and started to avoid the twins. Others whispered behind their backs. Even teachers seemed unsure how to treat them. Malik and Marcus felt isolated and scared. Their friends tried to support them, but it wasn't the same. The local media got wind of the story and sensationalized it. Headlines called them troublemaking twins and suspects in vandalism spree. The story was shared on social media with hateful comments and rumors. The twins' names and faces were everywhere. Malik and Marcus felt like they were fighting an invisible enemy. The prejudice and fear of a community quick to judge them because of the color of their skin. Despite all this, the twins held on to hope. They believed that the truth would come out and that justice would be served. Their mother continued to visit them, bringing them books and letters from friends who still believed in them. Tanya reached out to local civil rights groups, hoping someone would listen and help. But the system seemed stacked against them. Their court-appointed lawyer was kind but overwhelmed with many cases. He couldn't give Malik and Marcus the attention they deserved. The judge showed little interest in reviewing the evidence thoroughly. Video footage from nearby cameras that could prove their innocence was ignored or dismissed by the court. The twins started to feel like they were trapped in a nightmare. They missed their home, their school, and their normal life. Every day in detention was a test of their strength and faith. They clung to each other for support, reminding themselves they were not alone. One evening, Tanya sat in her quiet kitchen, tears streaming down her face. She wondered how things had gone so wrong so fast. She thought about calling someone who could help, someone powerful enough to make a difference. But who could that be? Malik and Marcus, too, wondered if they would ever be free. They whispered, late at night, about their dreams, about college, about the future that seemed to be slipping away. They promised each other they would never give up. Unbeknownst to the family, a call was about to change everything. A call that would bring hope and shake the foundations of the entire town's justice system. After Malik and Marcus were arrested and taken to juvenile detention, their lives changed completely. What had started as a normal day had turned into a frightening journey through a legal system that seemed more interested in punishing them than finding the truth. Despite their innocence, the twins found themselves caught in a court process that was anything but fair. The morning of their first court hearing arrived quickly. Malik and Marcus sat side by side in the cold, noisy courtroom. The room was filled with people they didn't know: lawyers, police officers, the judge, and reporters who had come to cover the case. Their mother, Tanya, sat behind them, holding their hands tightly, trying to offer comfort, even though she was scared and unsure herself. The judge, Ronald Kessler, entered the courtroom with an air of authority. He was a middle-aged man with a stern expression. Locals said he had a reputation for being tough on crime, especially when it came to young black boys like Malik and Marcus. As he took his seat, he barely looked at the twins before quickly moving forward with the case. Malik and Marcus were charged with vandalism and theft, serious accusations that could change their futures forever. The prosecutor spoke loudly, describing the crime in detail. He painted a picture of the twins as dangerous troublemakers who had caused damage and stolen from the local electronics store. The prosecutor's tone left no doubt that he wanted the boys to be punished harshly. Despite the prosecutor's words, the twins' lawyer, assigned by the court, was quiet and looked overwhelmed. He had many cases to handle and seemed to have little time or energy to fight for Malik and Marcus. When he tried to present evidence showing the twins were elsewhere during the crime, the judge dismissed it quickly. Video footage that showed the boys at basketball practice at the exact time of the vandalism was ignored. The courtroom felt cold and unfair. The twins and their mother watched in disbelief as the judge refused to consider their proof of innocence. When Tanya asked if the boys could be released on bail, the judge said no. The bail amount was set impossibly high, something Tanya knew she couldn't pay. This meant Malik and Marcus had to remain locked up in juvenile detention until their trial, which could take months. Inside the detention center, the twins faced a harsh reality. The walls were gray and cold, and the air smelled of cleaning chemicals and sadness. The boys were separated from their families and friends, stuck with other youths who had made real mistakes. Malik and Marcus knew they were innocent, but no one seemed to believe them. The officers treated them like criminals, and the other boys sometimes looked at them with suspicion or anger. At school, the story of Malik and Marcus spread fast. Their friends tried to stand by them, but it wasn't easy. Some classmates believed the charges without question. Whispers followed the twins in the hallways, and some students avoided them completely. Malik and Marcus felt isolated, like they were being punished twice. Once by the law and again by their community. Teachers who once praised their hard work and kindness now seemed unsure how to treat them. Some avoided speaking to them, while others kept a close eye, as if expecting trouble. The twins missed their normal life, attending classes, playing basketball, laughing with friends. Every day away from home and school made them feel more lost and alone. Social media made things worse. Local news stations reported the arrest, and videos of Malik and Marcus handcuffed and taken away circulated online. Comments filled with anger, and judgment appeared on their social media pages. People they had never met called them criminals and threats. The twins and their family faced a wave of hatred and misunderstanding that was painful and unfair. Despite this, Tanya refused to give up. She spent her days calling lawyers, civil rights organizations, and anyone who might help. She wrote letters and gave interviews to local reporters, trying to tell the real story of her boys. She wanted people to see Malik and Marcus not as suspects, but as her innocent children, students with dreams and futures. The court-appointed lawyer continued to do the bare minimum. He rarely visited Malik and Marcus in detention and did not communicate much with Tanya. The twins felt like they were fighting this battle alone, trapped in a system that didn't care about their truth. The evidence that could clear their names seemed to disappear or be ignored. Malik and Marcus tried to stay strong. They talked to each other every day, reminding themselves of who they were and what they hoped for. They believed their innocence would eventually be proven, and that they would go back home. But every hearing felt like another disappointment. Tanya's frustration grew. She began to suspect that racial bias was playing a role in how the case was handled. She noticed how the police officers spoke harshly to her sons, but treated white youths in the town with more respect. She heard stories from other parents about similar unfair treatment. The idea that her boys were being targeted because of the color of their skin was heartbreaking, but hard to deny. At one hearing, Tanya stood before the judge and pleaded, "My sons are not criminals. They are good boys. They are students with bright futures. Please look at the evidence and give them a fair chance." But Judge Kessler barely responded and continued with his strict approach. His eyes showed no sympathy. The courtroom felt like a place where justice was being denied. Meanwhile, the prosecutor worked hard to keep the charges alive. He spoke to the media, framing the case as a clear example of law enforcement doing its job. He refused to drop the case, even when the evidence against Malik and Marcus was weak or contradictory. The local police officers involved seemed more interested in protecting their reputations than in finding the truth. The twins' detention stretched on for weeks. Each day was a struggle to stay hopeful. They missed their mother and their home. They worried about their schoolwork and what would happen if they were found guilty. The fear of an uncertain future weighed heavily on them. Despite everything, Malik and Marcus continued to hold on to their dreams. They talked about college, about basketball scholarships, and about making a difference in the world. Their spirit and determination inspired their mother and a small group of friends who never stopped believing in them. One day, Tanya made a decision. She knew that local authorities weren't going to help her sons. She needed someone with real power to intervene. She reached out to her family, and eventually Malik and Marcus found out that their father, Derek Johnson, was now the U.S. Attorney General. The boys had not spoken to their father in years, as he had been busy with his work, and their parents had divorced when they were young. At first, Malik and Marcus were hesitant to call him. They didn't know if he would believe them, or if he cared. But with no other options left, Malik secretly made the call from the detention center. To their surprise, Derek listened carefully as Malik explained everything. He promised to help and immediately began to take action. With Derek Johnson's involvement, the case took a sudden turn. Federal officials started to look into the town's police and court practices. Civil rights lawyers arrived to support Malik and Marcus. The pressure on the local justice system grew as news of the Attorney General's sons being wrongly accused spread. Though the battle was far from over, Malik and Marcus felt a new hope. For the first time since their arrest, they believed that the truth might finally come to light and justice might be served. Their fight had become bigger than just their own freedom. It was about exposing the unfairness and bias in a system that had failed them and many others. When Malik finally made the call to their father, Derek Johnson, the U.S. Attorney General, it was a moment full of mixed emotions, fear, hope, and uncertainty. Malik wasn't sure if Derek would answer, or if he even remembered them after all these years. Their family had been apart for a long time. Derek had been busy with his important work, and the boys had mostly grown up with their mother. But now, trapped in juvenile detention and falsely accused, Malik and Marcus had no other choice. They needed their father's help. When Derek picked up the phone, he was surprised to hear Malik's voice. At first, he wasn't sure what to believe, but Malik's calm yet urgent words convinced him that something was seriously wrong. Malik explained everything: the arrest, the false accusations, the unfair treatment by the police and the court, and how the local system seemed stacked against them. Derek listened carefully, his mind racing. Despite the years of distance, Derek's protective instincts as a father kicked in immediately. He promised Malik he would do everything in his power to help both of his sons. Within hours, Derek Johnson began to take action. He used his position as the highest law enforcement officer in the country to call in federal investigators to look into the case. Almost overnight, the small suburban town where Malik and Marcus lived was flooded with federal agents, civil rights attorneys, and reporters. The story, once confined to local news, now attracted national attention. The fact that the sons of the U.S. Attorney General were caught in a web of injustice made headlines across the country. People from all walks of life began to follow their story closely. The arrival of federal investigators changed the atmosphere in the town's courthouse. Judge Ronald Kessler, who had been so harsh and dismissive before, suddenly found himself under scrutiny. The pressure was immense. The judge was known for his strict and sometimes unfair decisions, but now his actions were being questioned by powerful officials from Washington. D.C. federal agents started reviewing the case files carefully. They examined police reports, witness statements, and the video footage that showed Malik and Marcus were elsewhere during the crime. The evidence that the local court had ignored was now being taken seriously. The investigators also began looking into the town's police department and the judge's history, suspecting that racial bias might have influenced the handling of the case. Meanwhile, Derek Johnson held a press conference to speak about his sons and the larger issues their case represented. Standing before a crowd of reporters, Derek was both a father fighting for his children and the nation's top law enforcement official demanding justice. He said, "No child, no matter their race or background, should be falsely accused or mistreated by our justice system. My sons are innocent, and their case highlights the urgent need for reform in how we treat young people in our courts." This public stance inspired many people. Civil rights groups and activists rallied around Malik and Marcus. Demonstrations took place outside the courthouse, with protesters holding signs calling for justice and an end to racial discrimination in the legal system. The twins, who had been isolated and forgotten, became symbols of a larger fight for fairness and equality. Inside the courtroom, The local prosecutor and police officers grew uneasy. Their previous confidence was shaken by the federal inquiry. They began to cooperate more with investigators, knowing that any dishonesty or misconduct could be exposed. The pressure forced some officers to admit that they had rushed to judgment, and that they had relied too heavily on racial stereotypes. The judge's position became even more fragile. Reports surfaced that Judge Kessler had a history of giving harsher sentences to black youths compared to white youths accused of similar crimes. Civil rights lawyers gathered evidence showing patterns of bias and unfair treatment in his courtroom. The federal officials warned that the judge could face serious consequences if these findings were confirmed. As the investigation went deeper, the twins' case became a national story about justice and racial inequality. News programs aired interviews with Malik and Marcus's teachers, friends, and neighbors who spoke of their good character and achievements. Many people were shocked that such promising young boys had been treated so unjustly. Malik and Marcus began to feel a change. They were still in juvenile detention, but now they had hope. They knew powerful people were fighting for them. Their mother visited more often, bringing letters of support from all over the country. The twins studied harder, preparing for the day they would be free to continue their education. Derek Johnson also had to deal with his own feelings. The case forced him to face the years he had been distant from his sons. He realized that, despite his busy career, nothing was more important than being there for his family. The twins and their father slowly began to rebuild their relationship, talking on the phone more often, and planning visits once they were released. The local community's reaction was mixed. Some people supported the twins and welcomed the federal investigation. Others felt anger and resentment, unwilling to admit that their town's justice system had problems. The story sparked difficult conversations about race, fairness, and power that had long been avoided. Through it all, Malik and Marcus remained brave. They knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but they were ready to face it. The call to their father had changed everything. It had brought justice closer and given them a chance to clear their names. The federal investigation was just beginning, but Malik and Marcus were no longer alone. They had their family, their community, and their country standing with them. Their fight was not only for themselves, but for all young people who had ever been wrongly accused or treated unfairly. The twins' story showed that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. It was a powerful reminder that truth and justice, when pursued with courage, could overcome the deepest injustices. The federal investigation into Malik and Marcus's case brought a whirlwind of changes, but it also exposed deep problems that many people in their town had never wanted to face. As the truth began to surface, the twins experienced both hope and new challenges. Their fight for justice became much bigger than just their own freedom. It became a battle for fairness in a system that had long been unfair to black youth and families like theirs. One of the first major revelations was about the police officers who had arrested Malik and Marcus. The federal investigators found that the officers had ignored key evidence that could have cleared the twins right away. They had relied too much on witness descriptions that were unclear and sometimes contradictory. More troubling, some officers admitted that they were influenced by racial bias, making quick assumptions about Malik and Marcus because they were black and fit a vague description. This admission shocked many people. It revealed that the police department had a culture where officers were quick to suspect black youths, even without solid proof. The federal officials warned the department that changes were necessary, or else there would be serious consequences. At the same time, the judge overseeing Malik and Marcus's case, Ronald Kessler, faced growing criticism. The federal investigation uncovered a pattern. Judge Kessler had consistently handed down harsher sentences to black defendants than to white defendants for similar crimes. This biased behavior showed that the unfair treatment of the twins was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger problem. Civil rights lawyers presented this evidence during hearings, demanding that Judge Kessler recuse himself from the case. They argued that Malik and Marcus could not get a fair trial while he was in charge. The judge resisted at first, but the pressure became too great. Eventually, he was removed from the case, and a new, fairer judge was assigned. For Malik and Marcus, this change was a sign of hope. They finally felt that their case would be handled with more fairness and respect. The new judge listened carefully to their lawyers and reviewed all the evidence that had been ignored before. Video footage, witness testimonies, and alibis were given the attention they deserved. Slowly, the truth began to come out. As the court prepared for the next phase of the trial, the prosecutor was forced to reconsider the charges. Without strong evidence, it became clear that the accusations against Malik and Marcus were baseless. The prosecutor's office faced criticism for pursuing the case so aggressively without proper investigation. Tanya Johnson, the twins' mother, continued to be a strong voice for her sons. She spoke at community events and rallies, sharing their story and calling for justice not only for Malik and Marcus, but for all families affected by racial injustice in the legal system. Her courage inspired many others to speak out. The community also began to change. Many neighbors who had once believed the twins were guilty now expressed regret and apologized for jumping to conclusions. Local leaders organized forums and discussions to address racial bias and find ways to make the justice system fairer. Malik and Marcus, despite their difficult circumstances, kept their spirits high. They focused on their studies, determined to prove that they were more than the accusations against them. With books and letters from friends and supporters, they found strength to keep going. Their father, Derek Johnson, continued to support them every step of the way. He worked behind the scenes to ensure the federal investigation was thorough and fair. At home, he reached out to rebuild his relationship with his sons, sharing stories and plans for the future. The day finally came when the charges against Malik and Marcus were dropped. The judge officially declared them innocent, and the twins were released from juvenile detention. It was a joyful moment, but also one filled with mixed emotions. They were free, but their lives had been deeply affected by the experience. Returning home, Malik and Marcus faced new challenges. They had missed months of school and had to catch up. They also had to deal with the lingering stigma of the false accusations. Some people still doubted them, and the media attention had not completely faded. But the twins were determined to move forward. They continued their education with renewed focus and began speaking publicly about their experience. They wanted to use their story to help others and to bring attention to the need for change in the justice system. Their family grew closer than ever before. Tanya and Derek worked together to support Malik and Marcus's dreams. The twins started college applications, hoping to attend universities that valued not only their grades, but their courage and resilience. The community around them also started to heal. Police officers received training on bias and fairness. Local courts introduced reforms to prevent similar injustices. Activists and leaders promised to keep fighting for equality and justice for all. Malik and Marcus's case became a symbol of hope and change. It reminded everyone that even when the system fails, the truth can prevail. Their story showed the power of family, courage, and the fight for justice in the face of adversity. Though the journey was long and difficult, Malik and Marcus emerged stronger. They were no longer just twins wrongly accused. They were young men ready to build a better future for themselves and others. Cert after Malik and Marcus were declared innocent and released from juvenile detention, their lives were forever changed. The long months they spent behind bars, fighting for justice, had left deep marks, not only on their childhood but on their future. Even though the charges were dropped, the scars of wrongful accusation and the harsh treatment they faced in the justice system did not simply disappear. Their journey from that point was filled with hope, healing, and a fierce determination to make sure no one else would suffer as they did. Returning home to their mother, Tanya, was an emotional moment for the twins. She had waited anxiously every day, praying that justice would come. The house that once felt empty and quiet now filled with laughter and tears of relief. For Malik and Marcus, the warm embrace of family brought a sense of safety they had missed so badly. Yet, even as they smiled, the twins knew there was a lot of work ahead to rebuild their lives. One of the first challenges was catching up with their education. Months in detention meant missing school, falling behind on assignments, and losing touch with teachers and classmates. The twins felt nervous about returning to a classroom where some of their peers still believed the false accusations. But Malik and Marcus were determined not to let that hold them back. They threw themselves into their studies with a new passion, supported by teachers who had followed their story and wanted to help. Their school community, once divided by rumors and fear, slowly began to come together. Friends who had doubted the twins reached out with apologies and encouragement. The principal held meetings to educate students and staff about fairness, justice, and the dangers of judging someone without all the facts. Malik and Marcus became symbols of resilience, showing everyone that even after facing hardship, they could still pursue their dreams. The media attention that followed their release was intense. Reporters wanted to hear from Malik and Marcus about their experiences. At first, the twins felt overwhelmed by the spotlight. Talking about the painful months they spent accused of a crime they did not commit was difficult. But over time, they found their voices. They spoke honestly about how it felt to be treated like criminals when they were innocent, and how the justice system needed to change. Their story resonated with many people across the country. Other young people who had been wrongly accused reached out, sharing their own struggles and thanking Malik and Marcus for raising awareness. Civil rights organizations invited the twins to speak at events and rallies, where they became powerful advocates for justice reform. Despite their young age, Malik and Marcus showed remarkable courage, using their experience to inspire change. At home, the family worked hard to heal the wounds left by the ordeal. Tanya and Derek Johnson, the twins' father and U.S. Attorney General, grew closer as a family. Derek had stepped back into their lives during the crisis, and now he was determined to be there for his sons every day. Together, they talked openly about what happened, how it made them feel, and what they wanted for the future. Derek used his influence to support reforms in the justice system that would prevent other children from being wrongly accused or mistreated. He pushed for new policies to address racial bias among police, judges, and prosecutors. The case of his sons had opened his eyes to problems he had not fully understood before, and he was committed to making a difference on a national level. Malik and Marcus, inspired by their own experiences, dreamed big. They talked about going to college, becoming lawyers, or working in public service to help others. They wanted to use their education and their voices to fight injustice and create opportunities for young people who, like them, had been unfairly targeted. The community that had once been quick to judge them began to change as well. Police departments introduced bias training, focusing on treating all citizens fairly regardless of race. Courts reviewed past cases to ensure fairness and transparency. Local leaders worked with activists and families to build trust and heal divisions. While the process was slow and sometimes difficult, Malik and Marcus's case sparked important conversations that had been long overdue. Despite the progress, the twins still faced challenges. Some people held on to their prejudices, and the memory of the accusations lingered. Malik and Marcus had to navigate a world where they were sometimes seen through the lens of their past rather than their true selves. But they refused to be defined by what happened to them. Instead, they focused on their strengths and their future. Their story also highlighted a larger truth. The justice system in many places was still deeply flawed. Malik and Marcus knew that their case was not unique. Too many children and adults, especially people of color, faced similar injustices every day. This awareness fueled their commitment to be agents of change. They wanted their voices to help reform a system that often failed those it was supposed to protect. As they grew older, Malik and Marcus remained close. Their shared experience had bonded them in ways that only twins could understand. They supported each other through the ups and downs, always reminding one another of their worth and their dreams. Together, they were stronger. Their journey, from innocence to wrongful accusation, through fear and injustice, and finally to hope and activism, became a story of resilience and courage. Malik and Marcus showed the world that even in the face of great adversity, it was possible to stand tall and fight for what was right. In the years that followed, the twins worked hard to build a future filled with promise. They graduated high school with honors, earning scholarships to attend college. They chose to study law and public policy, determined to use their education to help reform the justice system and support families who faced the same struggles they once did. Malik and Marcus also stayed involved in their community. They volunteered with youth organizations, spoke at schools, and partnered with civil rights groups to raise awareness about racial injustice. Their efforts helped inspire a new generation to believe in fairness and the power of standing up for what is right. Through it all, their family remained a pillar of support. Tanya and Derek continued to guide and encourage them, proud of the young men they had become. The twins' story had brought them closer and strengthened their bonds. Looking back, Malik and Marcus understood that their ordeal had changed them forever, but not for the worse. It had taught them the value of truth, justice, and family. It had shown them how important it was to keep fighting, even when the odds seemed impossible, and it had given them a mission, to make sure no one else would have to endure what they did. Their journey was a testament to hope, resilience, and the power of standing up against injustice. Malik and Marcus had faced the darkest moments and come through stronger, ready to build a future filled with promise, not just for themselves, but for all who believe in justice and equality.